Well, good afternoon, Calvary family. Pastor David here with a brief word of encouragement. I'm so glad that on Sunday we were able to announce our new Global Impact partnership with Joe and Cindy Martin. They are newly appointed missionaries to the nation of the Gambia on the west coast of Africa, where they will be planting churches and training church leaders. What a blessing it is. What a privilege it is to be on their support team. From now on, since we're on their team, they are going to be counting on us to send our monthly support, but also to pray for them. And I hope you'll do that with me. On Sunday, we were also blessed to be able to send $1,000 to indigenous pastors in India, working with missionary Joe Gordon. Due to the nationwide COVID lockdown that shut down their churches, they need our support in order to feed their families and sustain their strategic ministries to unreached people. Well, this all connects to this week's Bible engagement story, the story of God's call to Samuel, which our growth groups this week will put into focus. Many of us remember the story. It starts when Samuel is just a young boy serving as an attendant to Levi, the chief priest of Israel. And one night, while sleeping not far from the ark of God, nor far from Levi, God calls to Samuel in an audible voice, saying, "Samuel, Samuel." Well, Samuel assumes that this is Levi calling and runs to his side and says, "You called, Lord?" And Levi says, "No, I didn't," and sends him back to bed. When this happens the second time, Levi again sends him back to bed. Finally, on the third time, Levi realizes it's God who's calling Samuel and instructs him how to respond. So when God speaks finally again to Samuel, Samuel says, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." And God tells him things about him and about Levi's future that in fact will set the destiny and direct the future of God's people, Israel. Whenever God calls, things change. It's always challenging to hear from God, and somehow we know whenever we hear from him that we've got to set our priorities aside and follow his direction. Well, it's always costly to do that. It's also always rewarding. What is God calling us to do right now? Well, for sure, he's calling us to go and everywhere and share the good news of Jesus and make disciples everywhere. He calls us to be witnesses to Jesus' life-changing grace and power, and he wants us to share that message with our family, our friends, our coworkers, our classmates, our neighbors, all those near and far in our network. He wants us to share it from our heart so they can see we truly believe. And in addition, God calls us to pray for them, that the Lord will draw them to Jesus and set it in their hearts to seek him as Savior and Lord. But God also calls us to pray beyond our locale, to pray for instance, our global impact partners, whom God has called to cross cultural borders in order to share the life of Jesus. Now, sometimes God calls us to go. And this summer, God has called some of us to go to Alaska to help the Burkharts reach indigenous young peoples and train them to share the good news with their communities. But here's the good news. God also calls us to send. I'm so glad we can send the Martins and could send this help to Indian pastors. And I have some exciting news that on March 21st, we're going to be able to share with you the other additional new Global Impact partners that we are able, by your generosity, to support and send. So I hope you'll be with us on the 21st when you can hear the specifics about that. We're going to send them with our support, and I sure want you to know about them so you can also send them with your prayers. When God calls us, things change. Responding to God's call is always costly, but it is always rewarding. In fact, I'm not sure there's any greater reward than the sense that we are, in fact, doing what the Lord has called us to do. Well, that's my word of encouragement for today, and I'm only would add this: I pray the Lord causes his face to shine on you today. God bless.